I had been married to Emily for 8 years. We were the couple everyone admired, at least, that's what I thought. Our marriage wasn't perfect, of course, but whose is? I trusted her completely, never once imagining she'd betray me. But all of that changed one evening. It started with a small, nagging suspicion. Emily had been distant for weeks, always preoccupied with her phone or making vague excuses about working late. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking it was just stress or a phase. But then I noticed the subtle changes, the extra care she put into her appearance before work, the hushed phone calls she'd take in another room. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. While she was in the shower, I checked her phone. I knew it was wrong, but something inside me said I needed to know. Sure enough, there were messages. Explicit, disgusting messages with a man named Chris. I couldn't believe it. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through their texts, reading about all the things they had done behind my back. But it wasn't just the affair that broke me, it was the way she talked about me. "He's so clueless," one message read. "I feel bad for him sometimes, but he'll never find out." I wanted to confront her right then, but something stopped me. Instead, I decided to play dumb. If she thought I was clueless, I'd use that to my advantage. That night, I lay in bed with Emily beside me, pretending nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, my mind was racing, piecing together the beginnings of a plan. I didn't just want to confront her, I wanted her to regret ever thinking she could betray me. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. I took screenshots of the texts, saved photos she had sent him, and even found out Chris's full name by looking up his number online. He wasn't just some random guy, he was a coworker of hers, someone I had met at her office party last year. I knew I couldn't act impulsively. If I wanted this to work, I needed to be smart. I started keeping a journal of her excuses, her whereabouts, and any patterns I noticed. I also set up a tracker on her phone, not to follow her every move, but to confirm the places she was going. Sure enough, she wasn't spending those late nights at work. It wasn't long before I had enough evidence to bury her. But instead of confronting her outright, I decided to escalate things. I started being extra attentive, bringing her flowers, planning date nights, even cooking her favorite meals. I wanted her to think I was the oblivious, devoted husband she mocked in her texts. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every time she kissed me goodnight or smiled at me across the dinner table, I knew she had no idea what was coming. And that gave me the patience I needed to see this through. Once I had all the evidence and Emily believed I was still clueless, it was time to set the wheels in motion. I wasn't just going to expose her affair, I wanted to destroy the entire facade she had built around her perfect life. Step 1 was isolating her. Emily was close with her friends and family, always posting on social media about how amazing our relationship was. I started planting subtle doubts. When we'd see her friends at gatherings, I'd make small, cryptic comments about how things weren't as perfect as they seemed. I didn't say much, but just enough to make them curious. Next, I reached out to Chris's wife. Yes, he was married too. I found her on social media and sent her everything, screenshots of the texts, the photos, and even details about the times and places they had met. She was devastated, of course, but also furious. She thanked me for telling her and promised she'd take care of him. With Chris distracted by his crumbling marriage, I moved to step 3, hitting Emily where it hurt most, her career. I anonymously forwarded the evidence of their affair to her boss. The company had a strict policy against relationships between co-workers, especially those involving dishonesty or unprofessional behavior. I knew this would jeopardize her position, but I didn't care. While all this was happening, I continued to play the role of the doting husband. I acted like everything was fine, even when she'd come home stressed or distracted, likely sensing something was off. Little did she know, the real storm was just beginning. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The first blow came when Chris's wife confronted him. From what I heard later, she kicked him out of the house that same night. Word spread quickly through their social circles, and soon everyone knew about the affair. For Emily, the trouble started at work. I'll never forget the day she came home, her face pale and tense. She told me there were rumors going around the office about her and Chris, and that their boss had called them both in for a meeting. I pretended to be shocked, asking her who could have started such a thing. She stammered through her excuses, claiming it was all lies and that people must be jealous of her success. A week later, she was suspended pending an investigation. She cried in my arms that night, and I had to summon every ounce of self-control not to laugh. But the real masterpiece came when I revealed my hand. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. I had moved money from our joint accounts into a private one and quietly consulted a divorce lawyer. I even rented a small apartment across town, so I'd have somewhere to go when it was time to leave. One evening, after dinner, I told her we needed to talk. I placed a folder on the table filled with every piece of evidence I had collected. Her texts with Chris, screenshots of her social media DMs, copies of the emails I had sent to her boss. Her face turned ghostly white as she flipped through the pages. She tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Why? Was all she could manage to choke out. I looked her in the eye and said, because you destroyed our marriage, and now you're going to reap what you sowed. Emily's reaction to the folder was a mix of panic and rage. She tried to play the victim, accusing me of invading her privacy and being cruel. I didn't let her deflect. Cruel, I said. Cruel is what you did to me, lying and sneaking around with Chris while I was here, loving you, trusting you. She tried to bargain, claiming we could work things out, that it was a mistake and she'd end things with Chris. I almost laughed. It's too late for that, I told her. Then I stood up, grabbed the packed duffel bag I had stashed by the door, and said, I'm done. She looked confused, so I explained everything. I told her I had already spoken to a divorce lawyer, moved my money, and even had a place lined up to stay. I also mentioned that Chris's wife knew everything, and that her little fling had cost her more than just our marriage. It had cost her reputation and likely her job. She broke down in tears, begging me to reconsider, but I was done. For the first time in months, I felt free. I walked out the door and didn't look back. But I wasn't finished yet. Over the next few weeks, I filed for divorce and made sure everyone in our lives knew the truth. Friends, family, even her parents, I told them everything. Most of them were disgusted with her, and the support I got was overwhelming. Emily, on the other hand, was left with nothing. Chris had no intention of committing to her after his own wife threw him out. Her suspension from work turned into a full-blown firing after their investigation confirmed the affair. And her once perfect social circle started to crumble as people distanced themselves from the drama. But the best part, I wasn't done yet. By this point, Emily's life was in shambles. She had no job, no lover, and her reputation was in ruins. But I wanted to make sure she understood the full weight of her actions. It wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was about justice. While the divorce proceedings were still ongoing, I dropped one last bombshell. Emily and I had owned a home together, a beautiful place we had poured time and effort into decorating and renovating. What she didn't know was that the house had been purchased entirely with my money, and I had made sure the title was solely in my name. During one of our mediation meetings, she tried to argue for the house, claiming it was her sanctuary, and she deserved to keep it. My lawyer calmly presented the paperwork, showing that she had no legal claim to the property. The look on her face when she realized she had no leg to stand on was priceless. But it didn't end there. I sold the house shortly after the divorce was finalized, making a tidy profit. Emily had to move back in with her parents, who weren't exactly thrilled with her. They were embarrassed and disappointed, having heard the full story from me before she could spin her version. As for Chris, his wife not only divorced him but also took him to the cleaners in court. Last I heard, he was living in a tiny apartment, barely scraping by. He and Emily tried to rekindle their fling, but without the thrill of sneaking around, their relationship fizzled out quickly. Despite everything, I kept my head held high. I had won, not just in court, but in life. Emily had taken everything for granted, and now she had nothing. And me, I had a fresh start, free from lies and betrayal. After the divorce was finalized and Emily was out of my life for good, I focused on rebuilding myself. It wasn't easy at first. The betrayal left scars, and there were nights when the memories still haunted me. But I refused to let her actions define my future. I threw myself into my work and hobbies, reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. I even took a solo trip to Europe, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the chance. It was liberating, rediscovering who I was outside of the shadow of my broken marriage. As for Emily, she tried to reach out a few times, sending long, apologetic texts. At first, I ignored her, but eventually, I responded with a simple message: I hope you find the peace you're looking for, but I've moved on. Please don't contact me again. I heard through mutual friends that her life hadn't improved much. She bounced between low-paying jobs and struggled to maintain friendships. Meanwhile, Chris had completely disappeared from the picture. They weren't the grand love story she had envisioned. They were just two people who destroyed their lives for nothing. Now, years later, I can say I'm happier than I ever was during my marriage. I met someone new, someone kind and genuine, who values honesty as much as I do. And while I'll never forget what happened, I see it as a lesson, a painful one, but one that ultimately made me stronger. Emily, she's just a distant memory, a chapter one closed long ago. It's been a while since I told this story, but something happened recently that made me feel like I needed to share an update. Last week, I got a message on Facebook, an account I barely use anymore. It was from Emily. At first, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Her message was long and rambling, filled with apologies and reflections about her life since we split. She admitted that losing everything had been a wake-up call. She said she realized how much she had taken for granted and how deeply she regretted the choices she had made. But then came the part that made my blood boil. She asked if we could meet up for coffee, just to talk. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. I thought about everything she had put me through, the lies, the betrayal, the chaos. But instead of anger, I felt pity. She was still chasing something she could never have. I responded with a single sentence. I've moved on, Emily. Please do the same. She hasn't replied, and I doubt she will. But that message was a reminder of how far I've come. I no longer feel bitterness or the need for revenge. I have a wonderful life now, a loving partner, a fulfilling career, and peace of mind. Looking back, I realized that getting revenge wasn't what truly set me free. It was letting go of the pain and choosing to build something better for myself. Emily and Chris, they're just footnotes in the story of my life, and I'm finally at peace with that.